My dear friends, this channel survives because of you. Please subscribe to keep these stories alive and growing. Comment your state so we can see how far these stories reach. Your click helps more hearts hear these truths. Now let me tell you my story. I grew up in Seattle, not the shiny downtown with the tall buildings, but the quiet suburbs where maple trees turn red in fall. After my husband passed, I stayed in the little wooden house we bought together. It sat on a corner lot with a white porch swing and a small front yard. That house held my whole life, every birthday candle, every Christmas stocking, every tear when my boy was sick. I raised my son there, just the two of us against the world. I worked long hours at the local cafe, minimum wage plus tips. But I didn't mind. Every dollar went into keeping a roof over our heads. Sometimes I walked 2 miles home after my shift rain soaking through my shoes. Seattle rain is cold, it cuts straight through your bones. But I always told myself it's worth it. Because when I opened the door, my son was waiting. His laughter filled the rooms, his drawings taped to the fridge. His school trophies lined the mantel. Those things kept me alive. By the time he grew up, that house wasn't just wood and nails. It was proof that I had survived. Proof that love and hard work could build a family. So when my son told me he was getting married, my heart swelled with joy. Finally, after years of loneliness, our family would grow again. I thought maybe now I would have a daughter too. I wanted to welcome her with open arms, to show her the swing on the porch where I used to read bedtime stories, to let her know this house could be her safe place too. I spent weeks preparing for the wedding. I baked pies, the kind my husband loved. I polished every window until the glass shone. I planted fresh flowers by the walkway, petunias and daisies, bright against the gray Seattle sky. Neighbors stopped by. "Big day coming, huh?" they said. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Yes, I told them. My boy is getting married. At night, when the house was quiet, I sat by the kitchen table going through old photo albums. Pictures of my son in Little League in his high school cap and gown in the old pickup truck we fixed together. Every page was a reminder. I had given him everything I had. And now all I wanted in return was to see him happy. I believed the wedding would be perfect. I believed it would unite us. I believed love would fill this house again. But I was wrong. My name is Helen Brooks, and for most of my life, my son Jim was my whole world. I raised him alone after my husband passed. It wasn't easy, but every sacrifice felt worth it. Every late shift at the cafe, every mile I walked home in the rain, every coupon I clipped to save a few dollars, all of it was for Jim. I still remember his first steps, tiny feet tapping on the old wooden floor, his laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls. I clapped until my hands stung, and when he fell, I scooped him right back up, promising he would never fall alone again. When Jim started school, I packed peanut butter sandwiches, a little apple, sometimes a cookie if I could afford it, and always a note inside his lunch bag. "Mom loves you. Do your best." Money was tight in Seattle, groceries rising, bills piling up. But somehow, I always made it work. I cooked chili that lasted 3 nights. I sewed patches on his jeans. I bought coats from Goodwill and shoes at yard sales. But Jim never complained. He only hugged me tighter. By high school, he was taller than me, broad-shouldered, but still called me Mom with the same gentle tone. He still hugged me before bed. He still made me feel like I was enough. I cheered for him at football games, even when he sat on the bench. I shouted his name so loud neighbors joked I should be the team mascot, but I didn't care. He was mine, my pride, my proof that love could build something strong. On weekends, we fixed the old Ford pickup in the driveway. He held the flashlight while I turned the wrench. We laughed when oil dripped on our clothes. Those small moments, they were everything. When Jim graduated, I was the loudest voice in the bleachers. I cried so hard my neighbor passed me tissues. That diploma wasn't just his. It was mine too. Proof that all those years alone, all those nights I worked 2 jobs had been worth it. Then came Kim, the woman who would become his wife. I tried. I really did. I opened my arms. I wanted her to feel welcome. She was stylish, polished, with heels that clicked against my hardwood floors. Her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She spoke about marketing campaigns, client meetings, trips she wanted to take. I listened politely even when I didn't understand half of it, because Jim looked at her with soft eyes, and that was enough for me. I invited her to Sunday dinners. I made pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with butter. She picked at her food, barely ate a bite. But Jim smiled, squeezed her hand, and I told myself it didn't matter. At Christmas, I hung stockings by the fireplace. One with Jim's name, one with Kim's. She glanced at hers expression blank, but Jim hugged me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. You always make things special." That moment carried me through doubts, because sometimes I notice things. Jim calling less often, his visits shorter, our conversations quicker. Late at night, I sat at the kitchen table, photo albums open. Pictures of Jim in Little League, at prom in his rented tux, behind the wheel of that old Ford. I told myself he was busy. That's what young men do. They build lives of their own. And Kim was part of that now. But deep inside, a whisper grew louder. Was I losing him? Was Kim pulling him away? I brushed it off. I told myself no. Jim loved me too much. He would never let anyone come between us. At least that's what I believed, until the wedding. The weeks before the wedding felt different. Not the kind of different that comes from excitement, but the kind that leaves a knot in your stomach. At first, I ignored it. I told myself every wedding brings stress. Flowers to arrange, seating charts to fight over, budgets to stretch. But the more time I spent around Kim, the more that knot tightened. She stopped calling me Mrs. Brooks. Not to switch to Helen, just nothing at all. Like I wasn't there. She spoke to Jim in whispers, on the porch, in the kitchen, sometimes even in the hallway outside my bedroom. The moment I stepped closer, her voice dropped. Her eyes flicked up at me sharp before sliding back to Jim. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I just wasn't used to another woman in the house. But then came the lists. Wedding tasks written on yellow sticky notes. I saw them once on the fridge. Table rentals, food orders, decorations, and nowhere, not once, was my name. I asked Jim gently, "Is there anything I can do to help?" He smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Kim's got it all handled, Mom. Don't worry. Don't worry." Those two words landed heavy. I had spent my life worrying for him. Every scraped knee, every school test, every late-night curfew, and now he told me not to, like I wasn't part of his life anymore. One evening, I came home from buying groceries, bags full of chicken, potatoes, flour. I planned to cook their favorite dinner. When I walked through the door, I heard laughter from the living room. Jim and Kim sat close together on the couch, her hand on his arm. Papers spread across the coffee table. When I stepped inside, the laughter stopped. Kim slid the papers into a folder too quickly. Jim looked down at his shoes. "What are you two working on?" I asked. Kim's lips curved into a polite smile. "Oh, just plans, wedding stuff." She tucked the folder into her purse. "Nothing you need to worry about." That phrase again. Nothing I need to worry about. But why did it sound like a lock clicking shut? Later that week, I overheard them in the yard. I was upstairs folding laundry. Through the open window, their voices carried up with the breeze. Kim's tone was sharp, the way a boss talks to an employee. "She'll sign it, Jim. She always signs. Don't hesitate." I froze, towel still in my hands. Sign what? What was I supposed to be signing? Jim's voice was softer. "I don't know, Kim. She's still my mom." My heart twisted at those words. Still my mom. Like being his mother was slipping into the past tense. I leaned closer to the window, but the wind shifted. Their voices blurred. When I looked again, Kim was staring up at the house, straight at my window. I stepped back into the shadows. Cold ran down my spine. The next morning, Kim placed a stack of envelopes on the counter. "Could you drop these at the post office?" Helen, her voice was sugary sweet. Too sweet. I glanced at the envelopes, all addressed to companies I didn't recognize. But before I could ask, she slid them into her tote bag. "Oh, never mind. I'll handle it." That same week, Jim came to me with papers. "Mom, could you sign these? It's just for the wedding venue." I held the pen, but my hand paused. The fine print swam before my eyes. I didn't understand all the legal terms, but something about it felt wrong. Kim walked in, her voice sharp though her smile stayed fixed. "Go ahead, Helen, it's just a formality." I signed, because that's what I always did. I trusted my son. I trusted that he would never let me fall. But later that night, as I lay in bed, the words echoed. "She'll sign it, she always signs." I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe I was being paranoid, that mothers sometimes feel replaced, but love always finds its way back. Still, unease crawled under my skin. The house felt colder, conversation shorter, laughter quieter when I entered a room. I tried to push it aside. I told myself the wedding would fix everything, that standing in that backyard under the string lights watching Jim say I do would bring us all together again. But deep inside, a voice whispered louder each day. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And I wasn't ready for what it would be. The wedding week finally arrived. Neighbors waved when they saw the tent go up. White chairs lined the backyard facing the maple tree that shaded our porch. I wanted everything perfect. I dusted every corner of the house. I baked cookies to welcome guests. I tied ribbons around the porch railings. But Kim didn't see it that way. She walked through the living room one afternoon. Her heels clicked across the wooden floor. She stopped eyes scanning the decorations I'd put up. Her lips pressed tight. Then she turned to Jim. "Those ribbons don't match the theme. We'll take them down." Jim hesitated. "Mom worked hard on those." Kim's smile didn't waver, and we appreciate it. "But this is our wedding, Jim, not hers. Not hers." The words cut sharper than any knife. I stood there holding a tray of cookies. My hands trembled, but I stayed quiet. The next day, I asked about the seating chart. "Where am I sitting?" I said. Kim didn't look up from her phone. "Don't worry, Helen, we've got you covered." I pressed again. Am I with Jim's cousins? With my church friends? Kim finally looked at me, her eyes flat. "You'll see on the day." Her tone told me more than her words. I wasn't important enough to plan for. Later that night, Jim came into the kitchen. He found me wiping the counter, though it was already spotless. "Mom, please," he said softly. "Kim just wants things her way. She's stressed. You know how brides get." I nodded, but inside I wanted to shake him. Did he not see how she erased me? How each decision pushed me further outside the circle? On Thursday, 2 days before the wedding, Kim called a family meeting. It wasn't really a meeting. It was Kim talking and Jim nodding. She listed everything that needed to happen. Flowers arriving at noon, photographer at 3, caterers setting up by 5. She handed Jim a notepad. Not once did she glance at me. Finally, I spoke up. "Is there something I can do? I can help with the flowers or set the tables." Kim looked at me, smiling like a teacher at a stubborn child. "That's sweet, Helen, but we've got it under control. Just relax. Enjoy yourself." Enjoy myself in my own house, at my own son's wedding. The words burned. Friday afternoon, the rehearsal dinner. Guests filled the yard laughing under string lights. The smell of barbecue drifted from the grill. I searched for Jim, wanting a moment with my son. I found him by the tent talking to Kim and her bridesmaids. When I approached, the laughter died. Kim slipped her arm through Jim's. "We were just discussing tomorrow," she said. Her tone carried a message I wasn't part of. "Jim," I whispered, "could I have a word?" His eyes darted to Kim. She gave the faintest nod. Only then did he step aside. We stood near the porch steps. I lowered my voice. "Son, I feel like I'm being left out." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, it's not like that. It's just Kim's vision. She's put so much into this." His words stung. Her vision. What about mine? Did my years of sacrifice mean nothing? I swallowed my hurt. I didn't want to ruin his night. So I forced a smile. "All right, Jim, as long as you're happy." But as I turned back toward the house, I caught Kim watching me. Her lips curved not in kindness, but in triumph. That night, I sat on the porch swing. The cool Seattle air wrapped around me. The maple leaves rustled overhead. Lights from the neighbors' houses glowed across the street. And for the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I told myself I could endure it. Just get through the wedding. Smile for the pictures. Swallow the ache. But deep down, I knew something was coming, something bigger than decorations or seating charts or polite smiles. And when it came, it would break everything. The wedding day arrived. The sun broke through Seattle clouds just long enough to shine on the backyard. White chairs filled with family and neighbors. The tent glowed with string lights. The maple tree swayed gently as if blessing the ceremony. Jim stood tall in his suit. Kim walked down the aisle, lace gown trailing behind her. Everyone sighed at her beauty. I sighed too, but for a different reason. Because in that moment, I prayed this union would bring peace. I sat in the front row, hands folded tight in my lap. The pastor spoke. Vows were exchanged. And when Jim said I do, my chest swelled with pride. For a brief second, I let myself believe that maybe my fears were wrong, that maybe love could mend the cracks. After the ceremony, guests clapped, music played, and the reception began. Tables lined with food, neighbors laughing over plates of barbecue, children chasing each other across the yard. For a moment, the house felt alive again. I carried a tray of cookies to the table. Jim caught my eye, smiling faintly. That smile reminded me of the little boy he once was, and my heart softened. But then it happened. The last guests trickled out. Plates, empty chairs scattered. The music faded. Only family remained. I was gathering napkins, my feet aching when Kim stepped forward. Her white gown swished across the porch steps. She stopped in front of me, her hand outstretched. "Keys," she said, her voice flat. Not a request, a command. I blinked, confused. "What keys, Kim?" She tilted her head, a smile playing on her lips. "The house keys, Helen. This is our home now. Jim and I will be living here. You can pack up your things." The air drained from my lungs. For a second, I thought I misheard. But Jim stood beside her, silent, eyes on the ground. "Jim," I whispered. My voice cracked. "Tell me she's joking." He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. Kim's smile widened. "She's had her time here. Now it's ours. Isn't that right, honey?" Jim's lips parted, but no words came. His silence was louder than any scream. I felt my knees weaken. The house I had built with my husband, the rooms I scrubbed, the porch swing where I read bedtime stories, every piece of my life wrapped inside these walls. And now my own son stood by while his wife demanded I hand it over. Neighbors lingered at the fence, pretending not to watch, but I felt their eyes, their pity, their whispers. Kim extended her hand again. "Keys, Helen. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I clutched the keys in my pocket, my fingers trembling around the metal. I wanted to shout. I wanted to remind them of every sacrifice, every mile I walked in the rain, every night I worked while Jim slept safe, every dream I buried so he could have his. But the words stuck in my throat. All I managed was a whisper. "This house is mine." Kim leaned closer, her perfume sharp in my nose. "Not anymore. You had your life here. Now it's our turn." I searched Jim's face, begging for some sign of the boy I raised. But he only shifted his weight hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. And in that moment, my heart broke. Not just for the house, not just for the keys, but because my son had chosen silence over me. The backyard grew quiet. The laughter gone, the music silenced, only the sound of my breath shallow and unsteady. I stood frozen, the keys burning in my hand, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The backyard went silent. The music had stopped long ago. Even the string lights seemed to flicker less brightly. I stood there, keys clutched in my shaking hand. Kim's arm linked with Jim's, her smile fixed like a blade. The neighbors lingered by the fence. Some tried to look away. Others couldn't hide their stares. I saw one woman whisper to her husband, her eyes full of pity. The weight of their silence crushed me. I had lived in this house for 30 years. I had hosted birthday parties on this lawn. I had passed out candy every Halloween. Neighbors used to wave when I watered the flowers. Now they only watched as I was erased in front of them. Kim's voice broke the quiet. "So Helen, are you going to hand them over?" Her words rang out across the yard loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. She wanted witnesses. She wanted everyone to see. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. The metal of the keys dug into my palm. I thought of my husband, how he painted this porch with his own hands, how we planted the maple tree together, its roots deep in the soil. He was gone, and now they wanted the house too. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Instead, Jim spoke, but not to me. "Let's go inside, Kim. We can talk about it later." Later. Like I was a burden to be handled in private. Like this humiliation wasn't already on display. Kim laughed softly, shaking her head. "No, Jim. She needs to understand now. This is our future. Her past ends here." I felt my face burn. The guests who hadn't left yet stood frozen by the tables. Paper plates in their hands, cups half full, eyes darting between us. Not one of them stepped forward. The shame pressed heavier than any storm. I wanted the ground to open and swallow me whole. I forced myself to turn away. I walked slowly up the porch steps. Each creak of the wood echoed in my ears. Inside the kitchen, lights glared too bright. The smell of barbecue and cake suddenly turned sour in my stomach. I leaned against the counter, fighting the tears that blurred my vision. Through the window, I saw Kim laugh with a bridesmaid. I saw Jim stand stiff, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Not once did he come inside. Not once did he ask if I was all right. The house, my house, sounded foreign. Their voices filled the backyard while mine was trapped behind the glass. I moved to the living room where the wedding gifts piled high, boxes wrapped in silver paper, cards tucked with cash, every present a symbol of their new beginning. And me, I was just the shadow no one wanted in the picture. I sat on the couch, the same couch Jim once curled up on with a blanket and a fever. I remembered holding him all night, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead, praying he would get better. Now he wouldn't even look at me. The voices outside grew louder, laughter glasses clinking music from someone's phone. They had moved on without me. I pressed my face into my hands. Tears spilled hot and fast. I had never felt so small, so invisible, in the very place that carried my whole life. For years, this house was my sanctuary. Now it felt like a stage, and I was the fool, the mother who gave everything only to be cast aside when the spotlight moved. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The noise outside slowly faded. Cars pulled away, doors slammed, until finally only silence remained. The silence was worse than the laughter. At least laughter meant life. This silence was emptiness, hollow, cold. I looked around the living room. Family photos stared back at me. Jim's kindergarten picture, his prom photo, our Christmas mornings wrapping paper scattered on this very floor. Those photos felt like strangers now. Memories mocked me instead of comforting me. I whispered into the empty room. What did I do wrong? No answer came. Only the hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent. I realized then I wasn't just humiliated in front of others. I was alone in my own home, isolated in the one place that should have been safe. And deep down, I feared this was only the beginning. The house was silent, too silent. A silence that pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. The backyard was empty now. The string lights still hung, but without laughter underneath, they looked like dying stars. I walked slowly through the kitchen. The smell of barbecue lingered mixed with the sour tang of spilled wine. Plates stacked crooked on the counter, napkins crumpled on the floor, remnants of a celebration that wasn't mine. I placed my hand on the table, the same table where Jim once did homework, where I helped him sound out words, where I taught him multiplication on scraps of paper. Now wedding programs littered the surface. Kim's name written in bold script, mine nowhere. I sank into a chair, my body heavy. The wood creaked under my weight like even the furniture was tired of holding me up. I thought of my husband, the way he sanded these floors with his own hands, how he saved for years to buy this house one paycheck at a time. He would be furious now, not at me, at Jim, at the silence Jim chose. My fingers shook as I reached for the photo album. It sat on the counter, half buried under envelopes. I pulled it free, dust rising in the air. The first page, Jim in his Little League uniform, cap too big jersey hanging loose on his shoulders. I remembered sewing that jersey, hemming it late at night so it would fit better. Next page, his 8th birthday. A cake lopsided frosting sliding off one side, but his smile lit up the room like it was perfect. Then his high school graduation. Me and the bleachers' tears streaking my cheeks. The neighbors teased me later, said I was the loudest mom out there, and I was proud of that. I closed the album quickly, my heart too raw. The pictures felt cruel now. Proof of everything I gave, everything I poured out, only to be discarded. I moved to the living room. The wedding gifts towered like monuments. Blenders, toasters, wine glasses, things for a new household, for Jim and Kim, as if I had already been replaced. I lowered myself onto the couch, the same couch Jim once curled up on his head in my lap when he had the flu. I used to stroke his hair, whispering, "You'll be fine, sweetheart. Mom's here." Now the couch was cold, and the boy who once needed me stood outside with his new wife pretending I didn't exist. Tears blurred my vision. I buried my face in my hands. The sound that came out of me wasn't just crying, it was the sound of breaking. I thought of leaving, of walking out the front door, never looking back. But where would I go? This was my home. Every memory I had lived inside these walls. I walked to the porch. The night air hit my face cool and damp. Seattle nights are always damp, even in June. The street was quiet. Just the hum of a neighbor's AC unit, the bark of a dog down the block. I lowered myself onto the porch swing. It groaned under my weight. I used to sit here with Jim reading bedtime stories while the sun set behind the maples. He would curl against me, his small body warm, his hand gripping mine. The swing moved gently now, back and forth, but it was empty beside me. And that emptiness was worse than loneliness. It was betrayal. I thought about the keys in my pocket. Still there. Still mine for now. But how long until Jim reached for them too? How long until Kim convinced him to force me out? The idea of packing my things, leaving this house behind, made me nauseous. Where would I go? A small apartment. Senior housing. A place with white walls. No porch swing. No maple tree. The thought crushed me. I wasn't ready. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was my husband's laughter, my son's first steps, my life's work. And yet tonight, it felt like I had already lost it. Inside, I heard footsteps. Jim and Kim moving around, their voices muffled. It was their house now, even if the deed said otherwise. I pressed my hand to my chest, my heart pounding hard. I felt like an intruder in my own home. The porch light flickered overhead. A moth beat its wings against the bulb, and I thought, maybe this is the end. Maybe this is how it ends for me. Alone, erased. For the first time in my life, I let the thought settle. Maybe I had nothing left. Maybe they had taken everything, my dignity, my place, my son. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I didn't bother wiping them. No one was here to see. No one was here to care. I closed my eyes, letting the swing move me gently, back and forth, the rhythm of endings. And in that darkness, I whispered to myself, "This is it, Helen. This is the bottom." But even as I said it, a flicker stirred deep inside me, a memory, a promise, something my husband once told me. And I realized maybe I wasn't as powerless as they thought. The night felt endless. I rocked on the porch swing, eyes swollen, body heavy, soul cracked. By dawn, the street outside was quiet again. A light mist rolled in from Puget Sound. Seattle mornings always carried that damp chill. I stepped inside the house. The air smelled of stale wine, half-eaten cake, and flowers wilting in their vases, the mess of a celebration that had left me hollow. I moved slowly, touching the walls as I walked. Every corner whispered memories. My husband sanding the banister, Jim running down the hall with sneakers thudding on the wood. I paused at the mantel. Among the photo frames sat a wooden box, dark oak edges worn smooth with time. It was my husband's keepsake box, the one he gave me before he passed. My fingers brushed the lid. I opened it carefully. Inside, folded paper, a letter, and beneath it, a sealed envelope. I knew what it was. The will. His last words written in legal ink. I remembered the day at the lawyer's office, downtown Seattle. A gray sky rain streaking the windows. My husband sat beside me, weary from illness, but steady in his voice. "Helen," he said, "I want to make sure you're safe. No matter what happens, promise me you'll keep this safe." I promised. And for years, the envelope stayed untouched, because I never thought I'd need it. Not against my own son. But now, with Kim's demand still echoing in my ears, I realized my husband's foresight. He had seen something I hadn't. He had prepared for a storm I didn't know was coming. I sat at the table, the envelope heavy in my hands. The paper crinkled as I tore it open. I read line by line, my breath catching. It was all there. Clear. Unmistakable. The house. The land. Every asset my husband had left, all in my name. Full authority. Full control. With one condition: respect. If Jim or anyone else disrespected me, they forfeited their claim. Tears welled in my eyes again, but these weren't tears of defeat. They were something else, a rising fire, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. My husband's voice filled my memory. "Stand tall, Helen. Never let anyone erase you." I folded the will, carefully slid it back into the envelope. For the first time in months, my shoulders straightened. The heaviness in my chest lifted, because I knew now I wasn't the one on trial, they were. By mid-morning, family returned to the house. Some came to pick up leftovers, others to drop off gifts. The kitchen buzzed again, chatter and footsteps, though the joy had dimmed. Kim moved through the room, her gown replaced with a sharp blouse. She looked more like a CEO than a bride. Her eyes landed on me. Cool. Dismissive. "Helen," she said about the keys, "have you decided yet?" Her voice carried, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Cousins, neighbors, even the pastor who'd stayed the night. I stood slowly, the will heavy in my pocket. I could feel its edges pressing against the fabric. "I've decided," I said quietly. The chatter hushed. Every head turned toward me. Even Jim finally looked up, uncertain. Kim's smile sharpened. "And?" I pulled the envelope free, held it where everyone could see. "This," I said, "is your answer." Gasps rippled through the room. The lawyer, a family friend who had attended the ceremony, stepped forward. I placed the envelope in his hands. "Read it," I told him. "Read it so everyone can hear." He adjusted his glasses carefully, breaking the seal. The room grew so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. He read each line clearly. The house and land in Helen Brooks's name. Full authority. No transfer without her consent. Any heir who disrespected or attempted to displace her would be removed from inheritance. The words hit the air like thunder. Kim's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Jim's shoulders slumped as though the ground had shifted beneath him. I looked around the room. Neighbors wide-eyed, cousins whispering, the pastor nodding solemnly. And in that moment, for the first time since the wedding began, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. I felt strong. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "You wanted my keys, Kim. Here's the truth. This house isn't yours. It never will be, unless you respect me." Gasps again. Kim clenched her fists. But before she could speak, I turned to Jim. "And you," I said softly, "my son. You stood silent yesterday. You let me drown in shame, but today you will choose me or nothing." The room froze, all eyes on Jim. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. For once, the power wasn't in their hands. It was in mine. And I knew this was only the beginning. The lawyer's voice still echoed in the room. His words hung in the air like thunder after a storm. I stood taller than I had in years. The weight I carried for so long suddenly lifted. Kim's face flushed red, her jaw tightened, hands curling into fists at her sides. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Jim shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between me and Kim. He looked like a boy again, confused, cornered, unsure which way to run. For once, I didn't beg for his attention. I didn't wait for his approval. I spoke with the strength that had lived inside me all along. "This house is mine," I said. "It was built with love. It was paid with sacrifice. And it will never be stolen by disrespect." Gasps again. Some relatives nodded quietly. Others looked at Kim with wide eyes. A few neighbors whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. Kim took a step toward me, her voice sharp like glass breaking. "You can't just..." I raised my hand. Enough. No, Kim. I can, and I will. Because my husband trusted me, and because I know my worth. Her eyes burned into mine. But I didn't look away. For the first time since she entered my life, I wasn't afraid of her. Jim finally spoke, his voice low. Mom! I didn't know. I turned to him. My chest ached at the sight of him. My boy, the child I once carried on my hip, the man now standing torn in front of me. You didn't want to know, I said. You chose silence, and silence can hurt more than words. He flinched like the truth had struck harder than any slap could. Kim scoffed, turning to him. Jim, are you going to let her ruin this? This is our future. Jim's shoulders slumped. I don't know anymore, Kim. He looked at me, eyes wet. I should have protected you, Mom. The room grew quiet. Only the ticking clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space. I breathed deep. For the first time in days, the air didn't choke me. I placed the will back on the table. This isn't about money. This isn't about walls or keys. It's about respect. Without it, there is no family, and I won't live one more day being erased. The words settled over the room, heavy, final. I felt my husband's presence then, not in body but in spirit. His steady hand on my shoulder, his voice whispering, You did it, Helen. You stood tall. I wiped a tear from my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of defeat. It was release, relief, strength. Neighbors began to leave quietly, their eyes soft when they glanced my way. Relatives murmured goodbyes, some squeezing my hand in support. Kim stormed into the hallway, her heels striking the wood. Jim followed, but not before looking back at me. His face carried shame, but also something else, a glimmer of understanding. I let him go, because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anyone. I wasn't begging to be seen. I was standing in my own home on my own feet with my dignity intact. That night, the house was quiet again, but it was a different quiet. Not the silence of isolation, the silence of peace. I brewed a cup of tea, chamomile, the kind I used to drink with my husband. I sat on the porch swing. The maple tree rustled above its leaves, catching the glow of the streetlight. For the first time since the wedding began, I breathed deep without pain. The night air was cool, but it felt like healing. I wasn't naive. I knew battles still waited. Kim wasn't done. Jim still had choices to make, but I also knew this. I had found my voice again, and no one could take it from me. As I sipped my tea, a thought settled in my heart. Maybe healing doesn't mean fixing everyone else. Maybe healing means protecting yourself and letting go of those who choose harm. I closed my eyes. The swing rocked gently, back and forth, the rhythm of survival. And I knew whatever came next, I was ready. The days after the wedding felt different. The air in the house was lighter. The tension that had gripped every corner loosened. Kim didn't stay long. She packed her things within a week. Her footsteps echoed sharp on the stairs' heels, clicking one last time across my floors. She didn't look back, not at the porch swing, not at me. Just at Jim. Come with me, she hissed. But Jim didn't move. He stood by the doorway, hands buried deep in his pockets, his eyes full of something between guilt and grief. Kim slammed the door behind her. The sound rattled the windows. And just like that, her reign in my house was over. Jim stayed. For days, he barely spoke. He moved through the kitchen quietly like a guest instead of a son. I didn't press him. I had learned silence could be a weapon, but it could also be a lesson. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where he once scribbled math problems. He looked older now, heavier in spirit. Mom, he said, voice breaking. I failed you. I let the words settle. For years, I had begged for his attention. But this time, I simply listened. You gave me everything, he continued, and I stood there. While she tried to take it all away. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I reached across the table. My hand found his. The same hand I held when he was 5, crossing the street to kindergarten. You're my son, Jim, I whispered. I can't erase that. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to heal. His shoulders shook. Tears rolled down his face, and for the first time in months, he looked at me, really looked. From that day, things began to change. Slowly. Not perfect, but real. Jim took responsibility. He apologized to neighbors who had witnessed my humiliation. He told relatives the truth, that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't erased, that I had stood tall. As for Kim, she filed for separation within months. She couldn't accept a life without control. She thought Jim would choose her over me. But the will had shown her that respect is the only key to this house, and she never held it. The community saw the truth too. For weeks, people stopped by, bringing pies, casseroles, flowers. One neighbor hugged me tight. "You reminded us," she said, "that dignity is worth more than property." The house felt alive again, not because of decorations, but because I reclaimed it. Every picture on the wall no longer mocked me. They honored me. They told the story of a woman who gave everything and refused to be erased. At night, I sat on the porch swing. The maple tree above whispered in the breeze. I thought of my husband, of his steady hands, of the promise he left me. Stand tall, Helen. Never let anyone erase you. I smiled through tears, because I had done just that. Jim often sat beside me now, not the little boy he once was, but still my son. We didn't need many words. The silence between us no longer felt heavy. It felt like healing. I knew challenges would come again. Life always brings them. But I also knew this, I would face them with my head high. Because I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just a widow. I was Helen Brooks, and I had found my strength again. Family can break you, but it can also teach you where your true strength lies. I stood at the edge of losing everything, and in that moment, I discovered my worth. So I ask you, what would you do if the people you love most turned their backs on you? Would you stay silent? Or would you stand tall? If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt erased by your own family? Hit subscribe for more true family stories, because every story deserves to be heard.